On this week's edition of the WrestleHavoc Podcast, we are going to be talking about AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Forbidden Door card shaping up to be an all-timer. We have an update on the WWE Television rights negotiations with NBC Universal and Fox, plus Tony Khan comments on Barstool's Wrasslin podcast about AEW Collision and the return of CM Punk. All this and much more right here on episode 17 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
You're listening to the WrestleHavoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes right here on episode 17 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Of course, this is the show where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We got a lot of things to talk about right here on the show. Of course, we are going to be talking about the AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door match card. Of course, this match card is shaping up to be a fucking classic. Of course, we have two matches announced. We have Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, taking on the Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada. Plus, we have the rematch from Wrestle Kingdom this past January with Kenny Omega defending his IWGP United States Championship against Will Ospreay. We got news on a possible match happening at Forbidden Door. You guys are going to be shocked about what this match is possibly going to be. We also have an update on the WWE Television rights negotiations when it comes to NBC Universal and Fox. Those negotiating windows have closed, and now WWE is able to shop around their product to any other network that they can. We're going to be talking about that. We got Tony Khan commenting on AEW Collision and the return of CM Punk on Barstool's Wrasslin podcast, which I didn't check out the interview yet, but I got some clip bits that I wanted to talk about right here on the show. Also, we talk about Nick Khan wanting NXT to become more of a third brand and why I think that is such a ludicrous statement by Nick Khan, considering the fact that when Triple H was running NXT Black and Gold during the height of that era, he was basically booking that show as a third brand, and he even went on record and calling it a third brand. So we're going to be talking about all this and much more right here on episode 17 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, the WrestleHavoc Podcast is also available on audio platforms. It is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. So if you guys want to listen to the WrestleHavoc Podcast in audio format, it is available on all of those platforms. Also, if you guys have missed it, the WWE Raw review is up on the channel. We talk about the tension brewing between Finn Balor and Damian Priest as Finn Balor gets a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship against Seth Rollins, as well as Damian Priest beating Finn Balor, or Damian Priest beating Matt Riddle, I should say, in the Money in the Bank qualifying match, and now he's going to be a part of Money in the Bank. What are they leading to? Is Damian Priest going to be kicked out of Judgment Day? We're going to have to wait and see, but I talk about all this and much more right here on the Raw review, right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. So if you guys missed the Raw review, the link will be in the description below. Also, AEW Collision. You guys know AEW Collision is coming June 17th on TNT, and it's going to showcase the return of CM Punk, and he's going to be teaming up with FTR against Samoa Joe and Bullet Club Gold's Switchblade Jay White and Juice Robinson. I, of course, am going to be covering AEW Collision right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. So if you guys want to check out the AEW Collision review, it will be coming June 17th right here on the channel. So make sure you guys keep that in notes, because I will be covering AEW Collision. All right. Let's, without any further ado, let's get into episode 17 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. We got a lot of topics to talk about, man. There's a lot of news in wrestling this week. Of course, we are going to be talking about, and we're going to be kicking off the show on the WWE Television rights negotiations. We got WWE exclusive TV rights negotiating windows close with NBC Universal and Fox. And there was also an interesting fact about AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery and their relationship. I am reading this from the people at the Wrestling Observer F4W Online. The WWE exclusive TV rights negotiating windows for both Fox and NBC Universal have closed, and the company can now officially solicit interest from the rest of the broadcast and streaming world. The news was first reported by the New York Post's Andrew Marchand, who also included an interesting note about AEW and Warner Brothers Discovery. The exclusive period began during WrestleMania weekend in April, and in late May, Khan said that the window had already closed with Fox while NBC Universal still had some time. While he noted incumbents traditionally remain the favorites, sources have indicated that Disney has shown interest, but for FX as opposed to ESPN, as the latter can't guarantee a specific night of the week due to rotating the slate of their games, which is very interesting because Nick Khan, I believe, has went on record and talked about streaming, being the future when it comes to WWE, and there's been a lot of reports on WWE wanting to maybe have a deal with Amazon Prime, and in this particular story, Amazon Prime is actually listed right over here. Marchand also stated that Amazon Prime Video will be in talks for WWE, and you can see how that fits in their strategy, says Marchand, given their NFL deal for their Thursday Night Football games and their bidding for college football's Big Ten Conference. Marchand also noted that he considers both Apple and Warner Brothers Discovery as dark horse candidates due to their NBA pursuits, but, quote-unquote, one nugget I was told was that may interest wrestling fans is that Warner Brothers Discovery does not have to stay exclusive to AEW. It would be something if it got in on WWE, but I do not see it yet. Of course, the 5-year deals with both NBC Universal, of course, when it comes to NBC Universal, it's $265 million a year for Raw, and for Fox, it's $205 million per year on SmackDown, and that, of course, in total, for Fox is going to be a $1 billion deal expire in October of 2024. WWE CEO Nick Khan has remained confident in the company getting a rights increase that could be 1.5 times of what their current deals are. All right, so we got a lot to unpack here. Of course, we know that this is a year where WWE and AEW as well are negotiating for their television rights, and it's pretty much safe to say when it comes to WWE, of course, they are going to get a renewal, or they're going to go to a different network. Now, just because the negotiating window closed for both NBC Universal and Fox does not mean that I believe the negotiating is over. There could be a chance. Like, the only meaning of the whole negotiating window closing for NBC Universal and Fox is that now WWE can shop around their product on different television networks to maybe get a bigger deal than what they are offered by both NBC Universal and Fox. What are my predictions on where I think WWE will land their television for? Now, keep in mind, WWE has multiple deals in place when it comes to their content. Primarily 3 deals. They have, of course, a television deal, and this is the key word, television deal, with NBC Universal. They have a television deal with Fox to air SmackDown. Now, keep in mind, I remember when the whole negotiating rumor started with Fox and WWE, the original plan was to put Raw on Fox instead of SmackDown, but USA Network wanted to keep Raw, and instead they lost SmackDown to Fox, which led to NXT going into the USA Network. Now, if you really think about it, WWE has a television deal with NBC Universal. They also have a television deal with Fox. They also have a deal worth over $1 billion, I believe, over the course of 5 years with Peacock, which is an NBC Universal property. But the television deal and the Peacock deal, even though they're under the same umbrella with NBC Universal, those are 2 separate deals. So what's interesting about this is whoever WWE goes to, it's going to be probably worth a shit ton of money. I mean, WWE, as this report stated, they want to look for a 1.5% increase on what they want from their current television deals. They list Disney. Of course, they own the FX network. They also own ESPN, and I believe they also own the ABC networks. All the games and all the stuff from UFC and all the other stuff that ESPN has a deal with that air on ESPN also air specials, I believe, on ABC. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if WWE manages to go and have a deal with Disney, I would possibly assume that, yes, they would air on the FX network, but also maybe for a show like SmackDown, which is right now under a deal with a broadcast network like Fox. Fox is not cable, Fox is broadcast. We could possibly see maybe a show like SmackDown end up on ABC. But do I think Fox will end up renewing WWE? My prediction is actually no. That doesn't mean WWE is doomed like all these other people think it is. It's not. It's just I feel like WWE kind of understands what they kind of got themselves into when it comes to two conflicting, competing television networks being in deals with one another. And they kind of want to be under one umbrella. My prediction is NBC Universal is most likely going to give them an increase. And most likely, what I genuinely believe will be happening now, I may be totally wrong with this, is they can move SmackDown from Fox once that Fox deal is over, and they can move SmackDown from Fox to NBC, and Fox will just, have no show, and SmackDown will end up being on NBC in the future. But I may be totally wrong. When it comes to Disney, honestly, Disney is not far-fetched. I mean, Disney, they own everything, and if they have a deal with the WWE, I honestly would not be surprised. And don't be surprised if they end up airing something of WWE on the ABC networks if that deal ends up going through, but we do not know what's going to be happening. Keep in mind, these new deals that are going to be put in place later this year, they're actually going to officially kick off in October of next year, so we have time. But what's interesting about these new deals is pay-per-view, because when it comes to pay-per-view, that is the major kick, because we all know right now WWE has their pay-per-views on Peacock. You only pay $4 a month if you want the ads, $4 a month like I do. I have Peacock, and all you can do is just pay $4, and boom, you got everything. You got the pay-per-views, you got the table library, you got everything. Now, what's interesting is that WWE, I believe, are in talks of probably adding a traditional pay-per-view paywall to their shows, which honestly I do not think is the right decision to make, because if you do that, you're basically telling your audience, hey, you've been paying $4 a month for these pay-per-views. Now, for these major shows like the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, Survivor Series, and SummerSlam, we're going to ask you to pay, $50 4 times a year for these shows, which I don't think is the right decision to make, because, again, they, had their audience stay comfortable with paying $4 a month. And even before that, $9.99 a month when they had the WWE Network. So we're going to have to wait and see what they do. But if they end up having a deal with Disney, most likely they're going to have their pay-per-views on ESPN+. And when it comes to the UFC, I believe they have a deal with ESPN+. And the whole formula is, okay, you pay this particular payment a month for ESPN+ as a whole. And even if you do pay a month, monthly for ESPN+, you're going to have to pay a separate price for that particular pay-per-view. And when it comes to UFC, they pay roughly around $70 to $80 for just one pay-per-view, which on one hand, I think is very fucking stupid, but on the other hand, if you think about it, it's kind of smart business, because the people at the UFC know how much the UFC is worth, and the UFC is quality content at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, at least. I don't follow MMA. I'm just saying that's all I've heard. But $80 for a pay-per-view is fucking ludicrous when it comes to a UFC pay-per-view, in my opinion, but it is what it is. When it comes to this deal, the biggest takeaway is pay-per-view, because we do not know where these deals are going to be happening. But when it comes to the Peacock deal, that's interesting as well. I mean, I believe it's like a 4 to 5 year deal, so we do not know when that is going to be ending. It has like at least 3 years left, 3 or 2 years left. I have no idea. But we're just going to have to wait and see what they do, what happens. But another interesting note is Warner Brothers Discovery. The guy from the New York Post stated that Warner Brothers Discovery, does not have to be exclusive to AEW. Do I think they're going to end up going after a deal for WWE? I do not think so. I think that's very unlikely, but it'd be very shocking if it did, because now you're going to have one umbrella hosting both WWE and AEW, and honestly, I do not think WWE and AEW would kind of suit well with both, with that ideology, both coexisting on the same network. That's just my opinion on things, but overall, this is a big story, and hopefully in the next couple of months we find out who WWE is going to be negotiating with in the future. All right. In our next story, we're going to be talking about AEW Collision. This is actually a brief note for you guys internationally that are, of course, curious on where AEW Collision is going to be airing. For all of you guys in international markets like the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Ireland, AEW Collision will be on AEW Plus on Fight TV. So if you guys are curious to where you guys could watch AEW Collision, it's going to be available on AEW Plus on Fight TV for you guys all the way in the UK, Australia, Ireland, and New Zealand. Also, for you people in Canada, I know there's been a lot of talk on where AEW Collision is going to be airing in Canada because a lot of people are just very concerned about that. But now we finally have an announcement. For all of you guys in Canada, AEW Collision will be streaming live on TSN+. So be on the lookout for that, and hopefully you guys check out AEW Collision. All right. After that, we are going to be talking about Tony Khan, and he actually comments on AEW Collision, and he even comments on CM Punk's AEW return. Now, we all know what happened with CM Punk last September at All Out. He faced off against Jon Moxley in a great match, I thought, overall, in Chicago at the Now Arena. And, of course, after he won the AEW World Championship, we had the MJF return, and then we had, of course, the Brawl Out incident, or the Media Scrum incident, followed by the Brawl Out incident, which basically overshadowed everything that happened at the pay-per-view, which, in my opinion, was a great pay-per-view, and it overshadowed everything. Tony Khan went on Barstool's Wrasslin podcast, which I absolutely enjoy. If you guys haven't checked out the Barstool Wrasslin podcast, definitely give it a listen. Tony Khan addressed on how the Collision debut will impact the AEW roster, and he talks about the roster split. So AEW's new Collision series won't have a hard roster split. Once again, I'm reading this from F4W Online, the people at the Wrestling Observer. And also, I will be posting the link of the Barstool Wrasslin Tony Khan interview in the link in the description below. So AEW's new Collision series will not have a hard roster split now. There's been a lot of talks on whether or not this roster split was going to be hard or was going to be a soft roster split, and it looks like it's not going to be a hard roster split as a lot of people thought it was going to be, because a lot of the dirt sheets were kind of spewing all of this information of, oh yeah, there's going to be people, split up, on one show and the other, like Dynamite is going to be the Elite show and Collision is going to be the CM Punk show, and, a lot of people are going to be splitting up from their particular situations, primarily because of CM Punk. And what's interesting note to that is I was actually listening to the Don Tony show. A shout out to Don Tony. He brought up a good point. A lot of these dirt sheets are kind of spewing all this kind of bullshit information of, the supposed roster split, trying to avoid particular situations. And instead of using that terminology, they should have used the terminology of, hey, we're going to be having different touring groups. We're going to have this touring group and the other touring group. He brought up that really interesting note. Shout out to the Don Tony show. I think he's great at what he does. But the Collision series will not have a hard roster split. Ahead of the show debuting this Saturday, Tony Khan was a guest on the Barstool Wrasslin podcast. Khan was asked if Collision will have exclusive talent or if Dynamite and Collision will work hand in hand. Khan stated that he hasn't drawn, quote-unquote, drawn any hard lines between the shows or locked AEW into a roster split. Certain talent will be featured on certain shows, but there are also the opportunity for certain stories to cross between Dynamite and Collision. Khan stated that AEW's champions will be the champions of every show. In a quote by Tony Khan, he stated, and I quote, "I'm going to feature certain talent on certain shows, but I haven't drawn any hard lines or locked us into any kind of split of the roster. I think people are going to be featured on certain shows, but I also think that gives us a great opportunity to showcase certain wrestlers on both Dynamite and Collision at certain times, and certain stories that can cross the shows. I think the champions of AEW will be champions on every show, and frankly, every promotion in the world. We're not shy about AEW wrestlers going out and taking on the top stars, top competition from other promotions." Khan also said having 5 hours of television every week, that being Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage, gives AEW a better opportunity to utilize the roster more. Now, he goes on to talk about CM Punk, and now in this article it stated, CM Punk, Miro, Samoa Joe, Thunder Rosa, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Andrade El Idolo are among those who have been announced as appearing on episodes of Collision. The show debuts on TNT at 8 p.m. Eastern this Saturday, and it will be 2 hours every week. Khan addressed the reaction that he expects to CM Punk to receive on the AEW Collision debut going forward. In a quote by Tony Khan, he states, and I quote, "Well, I think it'll be very exciting to see how the fans react, but I expect a very positive reaction, particularly in Chicago for the first episode. And then going forward, CM Punk is one of our most popular wrestlers in the world, so certainly he's going to get a great reaction. And depending on who his opponent is and the type of reaction he's trying to get, I expect CM Punk to connect with the crowd as well as anybody in the entire pro wrestling business. He has an amazing connection with the fans, and I think that's part of his longevity and his mystique and his amazing connection with the crowd. CM Punk's a really great wrestler, and I'm very excited to have him back in AEW starting this Saturday night on TNT on AEW Collision." Very interesting that Tony Khan stated that CM Punk is going to have a greatly positive reaction. And look, to Tony Khan's credit, yes, he's going to get a great positive reaction in Chicago because it's fucking Chicago. But when he made that announcement 2 weeks prior on him announcing CM Punk, let's be honest with ourselves, there was a mixed reaction regarding CM Punk. I talked about this 2 weeks ago on the Dynamite review. I was at Prudential Center for Full Gear. As soon as the Elite started their match against Death Triangle, my section and a whole lot of other sections on my side of the fence in Prudential Center started fuck CM Punk chants. Yeah, there was a lot of fuck CM Punk chants in the beginning stages of the match. The crowd, the AEW audience, is not stupid. And this is why using CM Punk creatively well is very important, because if you're going to try to shove CM Punk as a babyface after everything that he did last September, I think that is a recipe for disaster. Yes, he's going to be teaming up with FTR, and FTR are babyfaces. But if you think about it, CM Punk needs to come in as a heel and off, period. That's all he needs to do. He needs to come in as a heel, because if he is not a heel, then what are we doing here? You know, he has to come in as a heel, especially with CM Punk is going into Canada. Now, the AEW Collision shows in Canada are not selling well in tickets. Like, if you look at the ticket sales for AEW Collision in the Canadian markets, I'm telling you, bro, those numbers are fucking atrocious. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, but again, CM Punk really, if you think about it, needs to come in as a heel. It just makes sense creatively. Now, when it comes to the hard roster split, what I see AEW doing when it comes to AEW Collision and the roster itself is, I assume we are going to be getting overlapping stories on Dynamite and Collision. That is what I see happening. But at the same time, we're also going to be getting stories that are going to be exclusive to Dynamite and stories that are going to be exclusive to Collision, which is definitely the right way to go. Yes, there are pros and cons when it comes to the AEW roster split. You're giving talent more opportunities, but at the same time, we just do not know what's going to happen. So I assume we're going to be getting stories that are exclusive to Dynamite and stories that are exclusive to Collision, but also at the same time, we are going to be getting overlapping stories that cross between Dynamite and Collision. So that is what I see happening, and honestly, that is definitely the right direction to go. And when it comes to CM Punk and the Elite, I talked about this, and I even tweeted this out. I pray to God. I'm being 100% honest, man. I pray to God, and I mean this wholeheartedly, that when CM Punk comes back, now I know there's been NDA signed, there's been a lot of legal shit going on. I pray to God, though, at the end of the day, that there's reconciliation on all parties. Like, there's reconciliation on all parties, because, again, the whole situation that happened at All Out last September in Chicago was completely unnecessary. It did not need to happen. It was completely, it was honestly completely avoidable, and they ended up not avoiding it whatsoever, and Tony Khan let it slip with his fingers, and it all escalated that night after the pay-per-view. But hopefully there's reconciliation on all parties, and hopefully CM Punk is in line and knows what he's getting himself into, and hopefully he doesn't embarrass the company like he did back in September at All Out. I just hope that there's reconciliation on all parties involved at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, AEW knows what the fans want, and I know this sounds a little far-fetched, but it just has to be said. Everybody wants to see CM Punk versus the Elite. That is what everybody wants to see. AEW has sold almost 70,000 tickets at Wembley Stadium for All In, and what bigger main event you could have than CM Punk and FTR versus the Elite? that is probably the biggest main event you can do. The story is there. You can literally play this out for how many weeks, I don't know. Just do it. Just absolutely do it. But you have to sit everybody else in a room and just hash things out. Hash things out. All this whole situation was stemming on was Colt fucking Cabana. It was literally based on Colt Cabana, and that's it. It's absolutely ridiculous. But Tony Khan, also in this interview, talked about how AEW Collision came to be. Now, if you guys don't remember, when the story started coming out on AEW Collision, the stories were that this show was originally going to be on 605 on TNT or TBS on a Saturday night, and it ended up being a 2-hour show. Now, a lot of people were also speculating that this show was happening just because of CM Punk. And I remember when those reports started, I even went on this show and stated that this show will be happening with or without CM Punk, period. And it looks like Tony Khan kind of proved my point, and he stated that David Zaslav, the president of Warner Brothers Discovery, was the one that greenlit the show because he was very happy on what AEW was doing on the Turner Network. So that is Tony Khan's interview with Barstool and kind of like the retrospective on what he stated. At the end of the day, I'm excited on AEW Collision. I'm very excited to see what they're going to be doing. You know, one of the things I really hope they do, and they do not, mistake kind of like they did with Rampage, is I want Collision to be different from Dynamite. What makes Collision different from Dynamite? From the presentation, from the booking style, everything about it needs to be different, honestly. You can't have Collision look exactly like Dynamite because then fans are going to be turned off. You have to make this show Collision just as important as you do AEW Dynamite. That's what you need to do at the end of the day, and hopefully AEW does that this coming Saturday, June 17th at the United Center on TNT on AEW Collision. All right, in our next story, we're going to be talking about Nick Khan. Yes, Mr. Nick Khan himself, the co-president or the former co-CEO or president, I completely forgot, of WWE. Of course, he was the one that was behind the WWE Fox deal. He believes that NXT can be its own standalone brand. This is very interesting. So in a quote by Nick Khan, he stated, and I quote, "We think NXT has the viability to be its own standalone brand instead of just being a developmental system. A third brand, if you will, where you can see crossover from our superstars on Raw and SmackDown to NXT while our young talent develops there. Once we get all of that situated, then we look at the other nights of the week to develop new content as well." I wanted to say this note and say that quote because it's kind of hypocrisy at its finest, in my opinion. If you think about it, it's kind of a bullshit statement by Nick Khan. Now, I'm going to go on record and say I do not watch NXT even now. I wasn't even the biggest NXT watcher when Triple H was running NXT Black and Gold. But you have to really know, when Triple H was running NXT Black and Gold, a lot of people called it the glorified indie on a WWE budget, and that's what it basically was. It was Ring of Honor on a WWE budget. But Triple H even went on record and stated that, hey, this is far from a developmental brand anymore. This is a legit third brand. And I always had this thought of people always made the assumption of, oh, Triple H, NXT under Triple H didn't do its job on developing new stars. And I laugh at that statement because if you really think about it, when Triple H was developing all this talent in NXT Black and Gold, every time when they would get called up to the main roster, they would be fumbled in obscurity. That is exactly what would happen. And people would say, oh, but that is Triple H's fault. No, it's not Triple H's fault. What it was WWE, that being Vince McMahon's regime in the main roster, having the future right in the palm of their hands and completely rejecting it. That is exactly what happened with NXT Black and Gold. They had the future, and they absolutely fumbled it and rejected it, period. And what happened was, you guys know, Triple H unfortunately suffered the health incident that he did. Thankfully, he's back. And, he suffered the health incident, and you guys know what happened. All the people from Vince McMahon's regime went to the performance center that one day and saw what was going on in NXT, and immediately just changed everything, rebranded NXT, and they turned it into NXT 2.0, and Triple H was completely shafted of all of his power. And the whole goal of NXT 2.0 was, hey, We're going to be solely developmental. We're not going to be a legit third brand anymore. Now, all of a sudden, Nick Khan is going on record and stating we're not going to be a strictly just developmental. We're going to be a third brand. I mean, that is hypocrisy at its finest. I mean, Triple H was doing what Nick Khan stated that he wants to do now with NXT. And all of a sudden, you guys are just going to completely, change that mindset. I don't know, man. I just wanted to point that out there. It was just hypocrisy at its finest. It's just a really dumb statement because, again, NXT Black and Gold, that's what it was. It was a legit third brand besides Raw and SmackDown. But if you really think about the idea of the third brand, people talk about the brand split of Raw and SmackDown. I never viewed it that way. The real brand split that happened in WWE in the 2010s, especially in the mid to late 2010s, was not Raw and SmackDown. It was WWE and NXT. That was the real brand split because NXT was completely different than the shit you saw on the main roster. There'd be times where WWE would have a major pay-per-view in one market, one weekend, and the night prior to that pay-per-view, in the same arena, they'd have a takeover, and it's like the audience was completely different. Like, the audience was more invested in the NXT takeover than the main roster pay-per-view. NXT was like its own separate promotion. If you want to talk about a real brand split, talk about the brand split between WWE's main roster and NXT's Black and Gold brand. That was the real brand split. That was the real brand split because NXT and the main roster were completely different from one another. Plus, they also had different audiences. And that is exactly what you want. And also, there was actually NXT fans. Name one time where WWE is like, oh yeah, all these Raw fans are going to gang up on all these SmackDown, blah, blah, blah. There's no distinction with Raw and SmackDown. And there's still no distinction now. So, I don't know. I just wanted to keep that in note. But Nick Khan talking about how NXT wants to be a third brand. I think it's fucking ludicrous because that is exactly what Triple H was doing when he was running the brand. So I just wanted to note that right there. All right. In our next topic, we are going to be talking about Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre, of course, has been in the news for the past couple of months regarding his contract status. And a lot of people were wondering when his contract was going to be up. But now we have a backstage update on Drew McIntyre's WWE return and his contract. I'm reading this from pwmania.com. That's where the article that I'm reading this from. Plus, this is also coming from PW Insider. WWE wants Drew McIntyre back by Money in the Bank. According to a new PW Insider report, there is a push within WWE Creative to get McIntyre back into his storyline mix by Money in the Bank weekend in London, which makes sense given his status as one of WWE's top European stars. Meetings were held last week to discuss pitches for Drew McIntyre's return, but there has been no word on whether they have booked his return. There has been no update on McIntyre signing a new WWE contract, but it is believed that he will not return until him and WWE reach an agreement on how he will be used moving forward. McIntyre's current WWE contract expires in early 2024, as PW Mania previously reported. According to the new report, a key issue is the current contract negotiations between the two parties is how McIntyre will be used creatively, specifically how meaningful his storylines will be. With less than a year left on his contract, it is believed McIntyre does not want to be aimlessly floated around storylines where he has already proven during the COVID-19 pandemic how important he can be in the overall company, not just as an in-ring competitor, but also as an overall ambassador to the WWE brand. All right, so what is my whole takeaway from Drew McIntyre? It's pretty obvious that Drew McIntyre was kind of, ever since Clash of the Castle, he was kind of being underutilized in a way. Yes, he was in a great triple threat match at WrestleMania, but let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, what really significance has WWE added on Drew McIntyre creatively? I'm going to give you the answer. Really nothing. There's kind of no direction regarding Drew McIntyre whatsoever. And if you really think about it, Drew McIntyre, kind of is not really put on the high burner right now as far as main obligations or main, focus on WWE television. Do I think Drew McIntyre is going to be, how do I put it into words? Do I think Drew McIntyre is going to leave WWE? At the end of the day, I have absolutely no idea. Do I see Drew McIntyre leaving? Yes. Do I see Drew McIntyre staying with WWE at the same time? Yeah, I do. It can go either way. If you really think about it, it can go either way. But I'm going to be honest, man. You know, a lot of people on the internet are immediately giving Drew McIntyre the All Elite graphic. And maybe that could happen. Maybe it could happen. But I don't see, Drew McIntyre leaving WWE to go to AEW. I may be totally wrong. But if you think about it, just because he goes to AEW doesn't mean he's going to be used significantly better over there. Because there's a long track record of guys coming from WWE over to AEW that have been fumbled into obscurity. Just think about this. Andrade last year. Miro last year. Barely on television. Keith Lee. Look where Keith Lee is now. You think he's in a much better position than he was when he first came into AEW? Absolutely not. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But overall, man, it's just, I don't know. Regarding Drew McIntyre on him being used creatively, I think Drew Galloway himself is just going to have to bet on himself. He's going to have to bet on himself when he maybe leaves WWE when his contract expires. Who knows? It's something that, it's not a matter of when, it's just a matter of if he will re-sign or will not re-sign with WWE. But I don't know. Very interesting developments regarding Drew McIntyre. Our next story, we're going to be talking about Logan Paul. Yes, Logan Paul is going to be making his WWE return since WrestleMania next coming Monday on Raw. I'm reading this from F4W Online. Logan Paul's return to WWE has been announced for next week's Raw in Cleveland, Ohio. Paul is set to return to the company on the June 19th Raw for his first appearance since losing to Seth Rollins on Night 1 of WrestleMania on April 1st. Paul is a Westlake, Ohio native, a suburb of Cleveland. Also set for next week, Rollins will defend the World Heavyweight title in an open challenge, and Rollins has already been announced for a title defense against Finn Balor at Money in the Bank on July 1st, following an in-ring promo with Balor on this week's Raw. Additionally, Shinsuke Nakamura will be facing Bronson Reed next week. Reed faced Ricochet in a singles competition this week on Raw, but Nakamura ran in to cause a no contest. On the May 29th episode of Raw, Nakamura defeated Reed to qualify for the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Dissension between Nakamura and Ricochet was teased in a backstage promo on Monday's Raw after Nakamura forced the no contest. So, Logan Paul is going to be coming back next week on Raw. I've seen a lot of people talking on social media about Logan Paul possibly entering himself in the Money in the Bank and winning the Money in the Bank. I don't know about y'all, but I think that's the wrong decision to make because for the past couple of years, the Money in the Bank ladder match has not really been that important when it comes to WWE creative because, when was the last time the Money in the Bank was used in a fair creative fashion? Really, it's been a while, let's be honest with ourselves, because nowadays, when it comes to the Money in the Bank, we got guys winning the Money in the Bank only to fail to cash in the Money in the Bank. So really, if you think about it, what the fuck was the point of the Money in the Bank? Do I see Logan Paul winning the Money in the Bank? Absolutely not. It would make absolutely no sense, and I'd be very pissed off if that happened, but we're just going to have to wait and see what they do. But I do not think it's a good idea for WWE to utilize Logan Paul for the Money in the Bank. But he's going to be returning next week. I mean, WWE is going to be coming to London for Money in the Bank, so we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. And London is a huge market, so they want all the star power that they can get. So Logan Paul, honestly, it makes total sense for him to come in, but I do not want him to win the Money in the Bank because everything that, if you think about it, this whole Money in the Bank, it's filled with non-former WWE champions. They don't have any former WWE champions listed in the Money in the Bank. That is exactly how the Money in the Bank needs to be. And all of a sudden, you're going to add a guy like Logan Paul, who wasn't even on the show every week, and you're going to have him win? I wouldn't want to do that at all, but we'll see what they do. But Logan Paul is going to be making his return next week on Raw. Let's talk about AEW's and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Of course, as you guys know, Forbidden Door is only in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be a freaking awesome show, man. We already have 2 matches announced for AEW's Forbidden Door show. Of course, we got the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, taking on the Rainmaker himself, Kazuchika Okada, as well as the rematch from Wrestle Kingdom this past January with Kenny Omega defending his IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship against United Empire's Will Ospreay. Now, we got news on Forbidden Door. We got two stories, actually, from Forbidden Door. The first we are going to be talking about is Mercedes Monet. AEW has inquired about Mercedes Monet for Forbidden Door, which is very interesting. As you guys all know now, Mercedes Monet is actually sidelined with an injury. But in a report by Fightful Select, Sports Illustrated ran a story recently indicating that Mercedes and AEW has been in talks, or had been in talks. Fightful hasn't confirmed as much as of that, but have details on AEW's interest prior to her injury at New Japan Strong's resurgence. AEW hadn't landed the former Sasha Banks, though there have been some references to her past on AEW television. Fightful Select have learned that while obviously there has been interest, there had also actually been an inquiry about the possibility of her appearing on an AEW show, specifically Forbidden Door. Those with knowledge of the situation claim that AEW had spoken to New Japan Pro Wrestling, or those with ties to New Japan Pro Wrestling, in an effort to facilitate the appearance. However, we hadn't learned if any progress was made in that sense. Sources on the New Japan side told Fightful that the potential of AEW using Mercedes was mentioned as far back as January, with Forbidden Door brought up at that point. We didn't hear of any particular progress, though. As of now, Mercedes is sidelined with an injury that NJPW believes will have her out through the Forbidden Door show. However, there was at least interest on the AEW side prior to her injury that there were talent at New Japan Pro Wrestling, and AEW believed that she was coming in to do the show, and even rumors that she'd be working against Saraya. We've been unable to confirm if there has ever been any plans for such, but confirmed Saraya wasn't approached with it. Saraya and Mercedes have a built-in history as the two worked together in Saraya's last match for 5 years back in 2017. We all know right now Mercedes Monet is sidelined with an injury. What do I believe? Look, if Mercedes wasn't injured, they were definitely going to utilize her in some capacity, 110%. I mean, it was pretty obvious that they were. But my best bet is if Mercedes or Jamie Hayter weren't injured, most likely we would have gotten that match, Mercedes versus Jamie Hayter at Forbidden Door. That is what I see happening, but as of right now, it looks like that is not going to be happening, considering the fact that, of course, now Mercedes Monet is injured, as well as Jamie Hayter. Now, do I see Mercedes Monet do I see her ending up showing up at an AEW show down the line? Absolutely. Do I see her getting signed to AEW? I do not think so. I believe she did sign a multi-match extension, correct me if I'm wrong, with New Japan. So that is off the table at this point. But do I see Mercedes end up, showing up at an AEW show? Absolutely. She's definitely going to be showing up in an AEW show. Primarily, in my opinion, I think she's going to be showing up at All In. That's my major prediction. But I may be totally wrong. But Mercedes Monet in AEW, don't count it out. That's my best prediction for that. Do not count it out whatsoever. She will definitely show up in AEW down the line. When will that be? I have absolutely no idea, but I think it will definitely happen. I think, it's pretty obvious. I think it should happen. It's just right now, it's not going to happen because of the state of her injury right now. Speaking of Forbidden Door, Kenta, Mr. GTS, Mr. Go to Sleep, is being discussed for a major Forbidden Door match. AEW and New Japan Forbidden Door won, of course, Fightful's fan vote for Event of the Year in 2022. It's already off to a big start with a sellout crowd and two huge matches announced, of course. That is Bryan Danielson versus Okada and Omega versus Ospreay 2. But there's more. This week, New Japan star Kenta tweeted about that he'd be interested in working Forbidden Door if the money is right. It would appear that the money is right because Fightful Select learned that this week that the working plan was for Kenta to work the show. Kenta actually worked AEW Dynamite back in April of 2021, teaming with Kenny Omega, Two-Face, Jon Moxley, and Lance Archer. We haven't heard that Kenta's deal is to appear at the show is finalized, but both companies are operating on the assumption that he is. However, the internally discussed, the opponent brings a different gravity to the situation. Fightful has learned that CM Punk has been discussed as Kenta's opponent, which could end up to bring closure to an over a decade back and forth between the two. Throughout their careers, each man has taken shots at one another, emanating from Punk using Kenta's go-to-sleep finishing move. Kenta said recently he no longer cares about that, but wants a lot of money for Forbidden Door. Kenta versus CM Punk. GTS versus GTS. Sign me the fuck up. I absolutely want to see that match. You know, it's funny. CM Punk went on record years ago, and this was when he was the WWE champion, when he had that over 400-day reign as the WWE champion. He went on record and stated he actually stole the move from Kenta, who at the time wrestled from Pro Wrestling Noah. And he's talked about how he just stole that move and he didn't even want to rename it. You know, he just kept it as the GTS, the go to sleep. So honestly, there is a built-in story right there. I mean, both took shots at one another constantly, I believe, on social media or on interviews about the usage of the GTS. But it'd make for a very interesting story. But what's interesting is that, of course, CM Punk is going to be returning to AEW with AEW Collision this coming Saturday. So honestly, when it comes to Kenta being involved in some way, shape, or form, if the money is right, which honestly I think the money is definitely right, if Kenta is going to be coming in for Forbidden Door, I think it's pretty obvious that AEW or New Japan is going to pay him a shit ton of money just to appear on Forbidden Door. I mean, CM Punk versus Kenta, a built-in story is definitely there, and definitely you can take advantage of that story for Forbidden Door. And if CM Punk and Kenta is a part of the match card, I mean, bro, this match card is going to be a fucking all-star. We got Danielson versus Okada. We got Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. And now, most likely, if the rumors are true, we're possibly going to be getting Will Ospreay versus Kenta versus CM Punk. Sign me the fuck up, man. This is probably already the pay-per-view of the year, and it didn't even happen yet. It goes to show you how impactful this show really is. And already, just by the two matches announced that we already know is going to happen at Forbidden Door, this show already trounces and already destroys the first Forbidden Door from last year. Because the first Forbidden Door last year was fantastic. Due to all the circumstances regarding all the injuries, the show was cursed. But this year, holy shit. Absolutely insane that we're probably going to be getting Kenta versus CM Punk. That is a 100% dream match right there. All right, so that is basically all I got in our last topic, and my last topic that I'm going to be talking about right here on episode 17 on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. We are going to be talking about and running through the match card so far for WWE's Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Of course, Money in the Bank is going to be taking place in a couple of weeks at London, England's O2 Arena. It's going to be a big, big, big deal. It's going to be a huge show, man. It's the first pay-per-view that is going to be taking place in London in a long-ass time. I believe it's actually the first time, but who knows? We're going to have to wait and see. But here's the pay-per-view rundown for Money in the Bank. We got the men's Money in the Bank ladder match with Ricochet versus Shinsuke Nakamura versus LA Knight versus Butch versus Santos Escobar versus Damian Priest. I don't know about y'all, but that is a stacked Money in the Bank ladder match. It's going to be a freaking crazy-ass ladder match. We also got the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. We got Zelina Vega versus Zoe Stark versus Becky Lynch versus Io Sky versus Bayley versus to be announced. We also got the World Heavyweight Championship match. We got Seth Rollins defending his title against Finn Balor. And we also got Cody Rhodes versus Dominic Mysterio. So that is the match card so far for Money in the Bank. Am I excited for the show? Yeah. I mean, I'm not really as excited as I was for a Clash at the Castle type show, but knowing, WWE going to these international markets for their pay-per-views nowadays, it's going to be a fucking banger show at the end of the day. It's going to be a great show nonetheless. But yeah, that was the WrestleHavoc Podcast, episode 17. We definitely talked about a lot of things right here on the show. We talked about the TV deals. We talked about Drew McIntyre, Tony Khan, Collision, all that crazy shit, Forbidden Door, a lot of topics. And it's going to be a crazy week when it comes to professional wrestling, especially this weekend heading into the summer. There's going to be a lot of events happening this coming summer. Of course, we got the debut of AEW Collision. We got Forbidden Door. We got Money in the Bank. And then later on, we got SummerSlam and we got All In. And then we got All Out the week after. So it's going to be a crazy summer for pro wrestling. And it's going to be an awesome summer. A lot of people say, it's the best time to be a wrestling fan. And we've stated that for like the past 2 years. And it's very much true. But this summer is going to be something special, but we definitely talked about a lot of topics right here on episode 17 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. But that is all I got for you guys right here on the show. Be on the lookout, of course, for the review of the first ever episode of AEW Collision this coming Saturday, June 17th, right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Of course, be on the lookout for my Dynamite review that I'm going to be uploading hopefully tomorrow night immediately after Dynamite, as well as SmackDown, as well as Collision. Of course, all that shit going on. But please like, subscribe, comment down below. Push that bell for notifications and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the freaking referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is Flamin' Ricky DeRays right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, signing out. I'll see you guys later.